I never thought a sentence could stick in my ribs the way hers did. You're too honest. The words weren't said with irritation or admiration or anything that could be pinned down neatly. They floated in the air between us like sawdust caught in a shaft of light. Just there, suspended, daring me not to breathe too hard in case they vanished. I work in a small repair shop just off Main Street. Grease-stained counters, a stubborn bell that rings even when no one touches the door, and shelves crammed with spare parts that smell like rust and old cardboard. It isn't glamorous, but I like the way time slows here, the way the hum of the old fridge in the back fills the silence no one bothers to break. That afternoon, she walked in like she owned the air. Not loudly, not the kind of entrance you turn your head for out of instinct. It was more an ease, the kind of presence that doesn't have to prove anything. She was older, mid-40s maybe, with lines that weren't flaws but stories, and eyes the kind you accidentally hold too long. Her laptop was tucked under her arm, wrapped in a leather sleeve that looked too nice for a place like mine. She placed it on the counter, steady, like she knew exactly how much space she took up in the room. "It keeps shutting down," she said. Her voice was even, unhurried, like she expected me to listen carefully. I nodded, pulling the sleeve open, pretending to focus on the machine. But the truth is, I was watching her reflection in the dull monitor. The tilt of her head, the way she pushed her hair behind her ear only to let it fall loose again. "So," she continued, "what do you think? Dead for good?" "No," I said without thinking. "It's just tired. You probably run it too hard." She looked at me then, really looked, and there was a flash of something. Amusement, maybe, or the faintest disbelief. "You're too honest," she said, not as a compliment, not as a scolding. Just a fact dropped between us. And because I'm young, because I never know when to shut up, I answered, "Then I'll be truth forever." It came out clumsy, too fast, like a sentence that tripped over itself on the way out. She blinked, and for a heartbeat the shop was too quiet, the hum of the fridge louder than it should have been. Then she smiled. Not a wide smile, not even a full one. Just a twitch at the corner of her mouth that told me I'd surprised her. We didn't speak for a while after that. I fiddled with screws I didn't need to touch, and she traced the rim of her coffee cup from the cafe next door, her fingers circling it like she was keeping rhythm with some song only she could hear. When I finally told her it would take a day to fix, she nodded like she already knew. She didn't argue, didn't ask for guarantees. Just picked up the strap of her bag and said, "I'll come back tomorrow." And then, this part one can't stop replaying. She hesitated at the door. Not long, barely enough to notice, but enough that I did. Enough that I thought maybe she wanted to say something else. Or maybe she wanted me to. The door creaked shut behind her, and the bell rang its tired little chime. I stood there with the broken laptop in my hands, staring at the spot where she'd paused, wondering why it felt like more had happened in those few minutes than in the last few months of my life. The next afternoon, she returned just like she said she would. I'd half convinced myself she wouldn't. People rarely mean it when they say tomorrow. But she did. The bell gave its reluctant chime, and there she was again, carrying the same air of quiet authority. She wore a slate-gray coat this time, half-buttoned against the early evening chill. There was nothing dramatic about it, and yet I felt something shift in the room, like a current that hummed just beneath the surface. Her laptop was already fixed. I'd stayed late the night before, double-checking things I didn't need to, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The machine worked fine. Still, I pretended to test it again as she stood at the counter. "You didn't have to rush," she said. "I didn't," I lied, fingers tapping keys that didn't need pressing. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp, knowing. But she let it go. The silence stretched, long enough for me to notice things I hadn't yesterday. The faint tiredness around her eyes, like she hadn't been sleeping well. The way her hands, elegant, steady, fidgeted against the strap of her bag. She wasn't restless. It was subtler than that. More like she was holding something back. "You look like you didn't sleep either," she said suddenly, catching me off guard. I laughed under my breath. "How do you know I didn't?" She tilted her head, a strand of hair falling forward. "Because you're pretending you did." I didn't answer right away. She wasn't wrong. And yet, there was something about the way she said it. Gentle, almost teasing, but not cruel. Like she'd seen through me without meaning to. You always notice things like that? I asked. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Only when I'm paying attention. The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. She turned away then, scanning the cluttered shelves of the shop as if they might rescue her from the moment. I watched her trace the edge of a dusty box with her finger, her shoulders tightening slightly, as though she was reminding herself to keep distance. I wanted to say something light, something to ease the tension. But instead I just watched the way her hand lingered too long on that box, the way her laugh, when it finally came, sounded like it cost her something. "Funny place you've got here," she said softly. "Funny good or funny bad?" She didn't answer right away, just met my eyes again, and for the first time, she didn't look entirely sure of herself. It was only a flicker, but it was there, a slip in her composure, a shadow of vulnerability she quickly hid behind a steady breath. That pause stayed with me more than anything else, because in that second, she wasn't the untouchable woman with the perfect coat and calm voice. She was just human, and I couldn't stop noticing how close she was standing, how the smell of her perfume mixed with the faint metallic tang of the shop. When she finally picked up her laptop and turned to leave, she hesitated again, just like yesterday. Only this time, she glanced back, holding my gaze a beat too long before the door creaked shut. The shop felt colder after she left. The rain started just as I was closing the shop. Heavy drops smacked the metal awning, pooling fast along the curb. I was locking up when I saw her standing across the street, coat collar pulled high, looking undecided about whether to wait or risk the storm. "Hey," I called out before I thought better of it. My voice cracked through the rain louder than I intended. She looked over, hesitated, then crossed quickly, dodging puddles, until she was standing under the small patch of shelter by the door. The air smelled of wet pavement and iron. "You're still here," she said, brushing droplets from her sleeves. "Closing up," I replied. "You'll get soaked if you try to walk it." She gave a small laugh, though it sounded tired. "I've been soaked before." Still, she didn't move away. Instead, she leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the rain like it was something to be endured rather than avoided. I don't know why, but I unlocked the shop again and pushed the door open. "Stay inside. Until it calms." She didn't argue. Inside, the place felt different, quieter, more intimate with the storm muffling the world outside. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, pale against the gray wash through the windows. She sat on the counter, of all places, her laptop bag resting beside her. It startled me, how natural she looked there, as if she belonged in this cluttered little space. For a long stretch, neither of us said much. I busied myself pretending to tidy up, though I was just moving the same tools from one spot to another. When I finally looked up, she was watching me. "You're careful with everything," she said softly. I frowned. "Not really. You are. The way you handle things. Even the broken ones." Her eyes didn't leave mine when she said it, and something shifted in my chest. I wanted to say something back, something that matched the weight of her words, but before I could, her phone buzzed on the counter. The sound was sharp, out of place. She glanced at the screen, her face tightening just enough for me to notice. She didn't answer, just silenced it and slipped it into her coat pocket. I didn't ask. Maybe it was an ex, maybe a friend, maybe no one at all. But the way she avoided my eyes afterward told me it mattered. The storm deepened outside, rattling the windows. We stood closer than we should have, both of us pretending it was just the small space that made it so. Her hand brushed the edge of mine as she shifted, quick and unintentional, or maybe not. My breath caught before I forced myself to step back, to give her space. I couldn't tell if she noticed or if she was grateful for the distance. When the rain finally softened, she slid down from the counter. The hem of her coat brushed against my arm, a small touch that felt bigger than it should have. At the door, she paused again, like always, and for a second, I thought she might actually say something. Her lips parted, but then she just gave me a look I couldn't translate and walked out into the wet street. I stood there, the storm easing behind her, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't stepped back. It wasn't planned, the way she stayed after closing. She'd come by for something small, a loose charger port this time, Nothing urgent, but the evening stretched, and neither of us seemed to want to mark the end of it. The shop was dim, lit by only one buzzing overhead light. Outside, the street had gone quiet, traffic thinning to nothing. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, her face half-shadowed. I sat on the stool behind the register, spinning a screwdriver between my fingers like it could distract me from the truth pressing in on both of us. For a long time, no one spoke. Just the hum of the light, the tick of the old wall clock, the soft drag of her breathing when she sighed. I'd gotten used to the pauses between us, but tonight, they felt heavier, like every silence was saying something we were afraid to name. Finally, she said it, not looking at me. Her voice was steady, but thin, as though it had been held in too long. "What are we doing?" I froze, the screwdriver still in my hand. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't made it an accusation. But the words landed hard, like they'd been waiting in the air all along. I searched for something to give back, but nothing came. Instead, I watched her, the way her eyes lingered on the floor, as if she couldn't stand to meet mine. The way her fingers gripped her own arm, pressing harder than they needed to. "Because this," she gestured vaguely, not at me, not at the room, but at something invisible between us. "This isn't, it can't just be casual." Her words felt like both an invitation and a warning. I wanted to answer, to ease the sharp edge in her tone, but all I could think was how alive the silence felt between each sentence. "You're young," she added quietly. "You don't know what you want yet." I should have agreed. Should have let her draw the line. Should have nodded and walked her to the door. But instead, I said the only thing that had been burning at the back of my throat. "I know what I notice." Her eyes flicked up, finally, locking on mine. And I couldn't stop now, not when she was looking at me like that. "I notice you stay longer than you need to. That you pause at the door every time. That you smile when you don't want to. And I notice I can't stop waiting for it." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. The silence was louder than anything we'd said before. For a second, I thought she might cry. Not out of sadness, but from the weight of being seen. She bit down gently on the inside of her cheek, her jaw trembling in the faintest way. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. Not much, but enough to undo me. "You shouldn't make me feel like this." The words tore through the room, and we sat in that devastation, neither of us moving, both knowing nothing would ever be the same after tonight. The shop was almost empty that evening, quieter than usual. She'd come by later than normal, after most of the street had closed down. There was no storm this time, no excuse for lingering, just the dim glow of the lamp I kept on in the back and her figure framed in the doorway like she was deciding whether she should be here at all. She set her phone down on the counter while I worked on the laptop she'd brought. The screen was cracked, nothing complicated, just tedious. She watched me, silent, her fingers drumming lightly against the wood. Then her phone buzzed. I glanced at it, only because the sound was sharp in the silence. A notification lit up the screen. Voicemail, Mark. She froze. Not visibly, not in a way most people would notice, but I did. The drumming of her fingers stopped. Her whole posture seemed to narrow, fold in on itself. "You can take it," I said quietly, not looking up from the laptop. "No," she replied too quickly. Her voice had a catch in it, small but undeniable. "It doesn't matter." I didn't press, though the air had shifted. She kept her eyes on the phone anyway, like it might demand something of her if she blinked. Finally, with a shaky breath, she picked it up, pressed the button, and held it to her ear. The voice that spilled out was muffled, distant. A man's voice. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. Something about calling again. "Can't let go, miss you." Her grip on the phone tightened, knuckles pale. When it ended, she didn't move right away. Just sat there, still as glass. Then she set the phone down with deliberate care, as though dropping it would break her along with it. "Mark," she said softly, finally meeting my eyes. "My husband. Ex-husband. It's complicated." I didn't know what to say. Her voice carried none of the control she usually had, just exhaustion, worn thin like paper that had been folded too many times. "I thought I'd buried all of this," she went on, almost to herself. "But sometimes he calls. Leaves words like anchors I never asked for. I wanted to reach out. Instead, I kept my hand still, afraid of what it would mean if I didn't. You remind me of him sometimes, she admitted, so quietly I almost missed it. Not the part that left. The part that stayed. The part that listened. The room tilted. I didn't know if it was a gift or a wound. Being compared to a ghost she couldn't fully let go of. Her eyes softened then, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked breakable. Not untouchable, not composed. Just a woman caught between memory and the present, wanting something she didn't dare name. Before I could answer, she whispered the kind of line that doesn't sound heavy until it echoes in your bones. I don't know if I want you, or if I just want to feel wanted again. And there it was, the shift I hadn't seen coming. It wasn't supposed to happen that night. I'd stayed late again, though there was no work left to do. Just the low hum of the fridge, the lamp throwing a tired circle of light across the counter, and me pretending I had reasons to keep busy. She came in without knocking. Her coat was damp at the shoulders, hair a little unruly from the wind. She didn't explain why she was there, and I didn't ask. Some things had stopped needing explanation. For a while, we didn't speak. She sat on the stool by the counter, chin resting in her hand, watching me sort screws I'd already sorted a dozen times. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt steady, like silence was safer than words now. Finally, she broke it. You shouldn't remind me of him. The words weren't sharp, just tired, frayed. I put the screws down. And yet I do. She gave a weak laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Not in the ways that hurt. That's the problem. Her voice faltered, then stopped altogether. I watched her blink, slow and heavy, like she was holding something back. For the first time, she didn't look guarded. She looked worn through. Human. I moved before I thought better of it. Just slid the stool closer, until our knees brushed. She didn't pull away. Didn't even flinch. You deserve better than to carry someone else's ghost, I said quietly. Her hand twitched at her side. Almost nothing. But then she let it shift, slowly, until her fingers rested against mine. Not grasping, not clinging, just there. Like she was testing if the world would collapse around us. And it didn't. She exhaled, long and shaky, and whispered, I don't know what this is. Neither do I admitted. We stayed like that, our hands barely touching, the silence stretching so thin it felt like glass. And yet it held. No declarations, no desperate promises. Just two people sitting in the wreckage of everything unsaid, finding that it didn't have to be spoken to be real. The clock ticked past midnight. The world outside might as well have disappeared. She leaned forward then, not into a kiss, not into anything reckless, but just enough that her forehead rested gently against mine. Her eyes closed, her breath mingled with mine, and for the first time it felt like we weren't pretending anymore. No fireworks, no music swelling, just the quiet collapse into something neither of us could stop. We stayed like that, breathing the same fragile air, until she whispered the last line of the night, the one that told me everything without naming it. Don't move. Just stay. And I did. I think about that night more often than I should. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We didn't even say the word love. And yet, somehow, everything changed. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't one grand moment that bound us. It was the small things, the pauses she left hanging in the air, the way her hand lingered near mine before finally closing the space, the way she'd smile without wanting to. Those fragments, strung together, became something heavier than either of us expected. She taught me that love, if that's even the right word, doesn't arrive like a tidal wave. Sometimes it slips in quietly, disguised as patience, as shared silence, as two people breathing the same air because it feels less lonely that way. And she changed too. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she stopped holding herself so tightly. She stopped apologizing for being tired. She stopped hiding the soft cracks in her voice. And maybe that's what mattered most, that she let herself be seen, even when it terrified her. I used to think age was a wall between us. 20 years feels like a canyon when you name it out loud. But with her, it turned into a mirror. She carried regret like extra weight. I carried longing like restless fire. And somehow, when we stood together, both felt lighter. I won't lie to you and say it was simple. It wasn't. The world doesn't pause for two people to figure themselves out. There were awkward mornings, unanswered calls, moments when we questioned what we were doing. But the truth is, once you've sat in a room with someone in that kind of silence, the kind that says I see you, and I'm not leaving, you can't unlearn it. You can't pretend it didn't happen. And maybe that's the lesson buried in all of this. Sometimes the most honest thing you can give another person isn't a declaration or a perfect plan. It's the choice to stay. To not run when things get messy. To let the silence speak for you when words fall short. She once told me I was too honest. Maybe she was right. But if honesty is what kept her from closing that door for good, then I'll live with it. Truth is a heavy thing, but it's lighter than regret. So, here we are, two people who should have walked away, but didn't. And I can't tell you exactly where it leads, or if love is even the right word. All I know is, it was real. It mattered. And it still does. And maybe that's enough. If this story made you feel something, pause, share your thought in the comments. Because maybe honesty, once spoken, has a way of finding the right ears.